So the exercise is called the HUVA exercise, H-U-V-A. H is heard out, U is understood, V is valued, A is added value. So pick one conversation a day, and this is how you build the muscle. After the conversation, put yourself in the other person's shoes and rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10 on all of those. Think of them, and on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do they feel heard out by you? How much do they feel understood by you? On a scale of 1 to 10, do they feel valued? And then the final A is you added value on a scale of 1 to 10. Beyond the valuing, you might even say, have you ever thought of applying that in other situations?
All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Nick Carrier's Best You podcast. I'm super fired up today to have back on the one and only Dr. Mark Goulston. Dr. Mark Goulston, I just want to start off by saying thanks so much for spending the time with me today.
Boy, am I excited. And right out of the gate, I want to give you can I give you some coaching?
Bring it.
I have a podcast called My Wakeup Call. And what happens is when I speak to young, ambitious people who talk faster than I think, I say, what happens when you talk faster than people think? It's very transactional. But what happens is if you're not exactly on the same wavelength as people, they'll start to smile. And the smile is not a yes. The smile is, I don't understand what you're talking about. And often here's the blind spot for a lot of young, ambitious people is it feels so good to be talking. You're getting stuff off your chest. It feels like a high colonic. You don't even care if they're listening because you're talking, you're venting, you're getting the stress out. What happens is you disconnect from whether the other person's even listening. And sometimes they will smile, and it's not tell me more. The smile is they're really thinking like, you're talking too much, you're talking too fast. Yeah. And then at the end of it, you think the smile is going to be, what do we do next?
Yeah.
In fact, let me ask you, do any of it, because I've been giving presentations to accelerators, to 15 startup companies at a time. So do any of your listeners fall into that category, entrepreneurs, young?
So yeah, some for sure.
So let me just give you this little tip because now they're going to bring me in to coach all the startup founders because they like this. And I said, this is how you pitch an investor. So can I tell you what the tip is?
Yeah.
So when you're pitching an investor and they smile, it's not a yes, because investors don't smile because it's all about money. And maybe they're smiling if you tell a joke, but you don't want to tell jokes because it can always go sideways. And when they're smiling, you think that means, oh, this is great. And at the end of the smile, they're going to say, what's our next step? But more often than not, they smile. And what's happened is they don't want to be rude because they've reserved 10 or 15 minutes for you. And after 3 minutes, they know it's a no. And so they're smiling like this. And I ask these startups, have you ever been in that thing? They said, just yesterday I had one of those. I say they're smiling because they don't want to be rude, but they've already figured out they don't want to invest in you. So here is the tactic that you can use and they used. And you have to modify it so you're comfortable with it. So when you're trying to pitch an investor and they smile, and your past experience tells you that what I'm saying is true, that they're smiling because they don't want to be rude, this is what you say. Can we press pause for a moment? And they're going to get nervous because you caught them blowing you off. And they're smiling because they don't want you to catch them. They go, what? And you say, can we press pause for a second? They're going to be a little bit off balance. And then this is what you do. It helps if if they can see you. You put your hands up and you say, when we started this conversation, we were like this. Here's you, the investor with money. Here's me, the company that needs money, and we were equal, but it shifted like this now. And here's you, the investor with money, and here's me, the company you're not going to invest in. So I think what happened is you were listening for something or looking for something, and we didn't cover it. Now, I tried to figure out what you'd be looking for and listening for, but I'm not 100% mind reader. And meanwhile, you've just read their mind, and they don't even know what to say next. And you say, given that we have a little time left, could you tell me what you were looking for and listening for that we didn't cover? Because by this time, you've lost the deal. They're smiling because they've already blown you off. And so they may fill in what they're looking for, or they may be uncomfortable. And here's what I told the startups, especially if you're a startup and you have a network of friends, and you all do. What you say to this investor is, if they're a little bit awkward, you say, can I tell you an answer that I've been getting from other investors when I have this conversation? And they're going to be intrigued, and they're going to say, yeah, tell me. I could say, some of the other investors I've spoken to have been really honest, and they said, what I'm really looking for is a win. I'm looking for a company that I can invest in that actually gives us great ROI, because I brought in companies that didn't. So I don't know if you can relate to that.
I want to dive deeper into, is that something, you brought it up in regards to me speaking quickly and ambitious people kind of speaking quickly, but is this like something where if you're having a conversation with maybe anybody, whether or not it's an investor or not, and you see that they're smiling, or you see that they're not quite getting what they might thought that they get, there's some kind of thing there that the person needs to be aware that there's this gap, and you can pause what it is that you're saying and ask them why there is this gap and how you can begin to close it?
Well, you can do it. So we'll segue. If you want to find out more, people can contact me. So how do we get the person to invest? So let's segue to what you just asked me, because a number of years ago, I contributed blogs to Harvard Business Review. And one of my earliest blogs was called How to Know If You Talk Too Much. Mm-hmm. And it was the most read blog of the week. And I utilized a friend of mine's traffic light rule, Marty Nemko, great career coach. You can look him up, Marty Nemko, Nemko. And when my book, Just Listen, which is behind me, came out, he said, Mark, for a guy who wrote a book on listening, you're terrible. And he said, you need to follow the traffic light rule. And I said, what's the traffic light rule? He said, unless someone is inviting you to do a monologue or a presentation, when you speak to someone, you have 30 seconds before the green light where they're listening to you turns to yellow. And then you have another 30 seconds before the yellow light turns to red and you've worn out your welcome. And the problem is those 30 seconds feel like 5 seconds because it feels so good to be talking and getting stuff off your chest. Plus, it feels so good to you to be talking. I mean, I'm feeling good now because I haven't shut up, but it feels so good to be talking that you can't believe that you're wearing out your welcome with the other person. And I think it's important to be aware of this because there's a disconnect. How could talking that's making you feel so good be something that they're getting impatient with? So it's a good idea to, as you're talking with people, to really check in if they seem interested. And you can really tell it more from their eyes than from their mouth, because their mouth is going to, when they're feeling a little nervous and they don't want to be rude, sometimes they'll smile. But if you look into their eyes, and you learn to do this, you'll see that their eyes are telling you, I've heard enough.
What is I think most people listening know that the idea that everybody loves talking about themselves. And so you want to make sure that, if you're trying to build a relationship with somebody or trying to build a connection with somebody, that you need to take the time to listen to them and give them a chance to speak, because everybody likes speaking about themselves and everybody likes speaking. What's the biology or what's the psychology behind why we like speaking about ourselves, and how can we use the knowledge to the answer you're about to give to make sure we're not speaking too much?
Great question. I think what happens is as we begin to speak, we start to feel a surge of pleasure, because instead of being bottled up, we're getting something off our chest. And what we're feeling is pleasure. And what's going on is we're feeling dopamine, which is a neurotransmitter associated with pleasure. But what happens is when we're doing that, we're triggering a stress hormone in the other person if we're talking at them or over them or down to them. And that stress hormone is cortisol. So as we're talking and feeling pleasure, their cortisol is going up if they feel that you're talking at them, over them, or down to them. And the more cortisol that goes up in them, the more stress they feel, the more that high cortisol tickles something in their brain called an amygdala. And amygdala is sort of the point guard inside your brain. And there's a term that people who know anything about neuroscience know called the amygdala hijack. And what that means is you trigger more cortisol in them from the stress, and that triggers their amygdala to hijack them away from being able to think. So they can't listen because they're feeling like they want to react with getting away from you or telling you, you're talking over them or you're talking too fast, but they don't want to say that. So you want to be aware of this. And here is something that I'm going to share with you that I'm fighting an uphill battle in America, but I'm getting good traction around the world. So I teach listening around the world, but I can't get arrested in America teaching listening because Americans want to be listened to. They just do. And I've spoken in Moscow, Bangalore, Delhi, Mumbai, the UK, Canada, on becoming a better listener because they're more curious about it. And I last spoke in Moscow with a Nobel Prize winner named Daniel Kahneman. He wrote a book called Thinking Fast and Slow. He's got a great new book out called Noise. And what I spoke to the 1,000 Russian businessmen in the audience, I said, I'm going to give you a secret that will change everything in your life. I said to them, if I focus on you listening to me, because you're business people, and I rattle off a bunch of points, you'll write them down, you'll try them, most of them won't work, and you'll say, well, they'll work for him, he's an expert. But if I'm entertaining and I give you good stories, you'll give me your mind for an hour. And then, Nick, I switched to my FM NPR voice, and I said, but if I focus, and here's the secret, I said, if I focus on what you're listening for, and I get what that is without you telling me, and I deliver on that, you'll give me everything. And then I said, is this what you're listening for? But rather than repeating my Moscow talk, we're going to do this with you, Nick, because I'm going to tell me if you feel a switch in your head, because we've kind of been talking to each other, although I'm not letting you get a word in. But if I focus on what you're listening for, let me put on my Swami hat here. What you're listening for, and try this on, is you want to give value to your audience. And by value, what you want to give them is something that they can use immediately. Something they can use immediately to become more successful, more impactful, get more business. And you're listening for guests who can, give a few insights like I'm giving, but you're listening for people who can give practical, tactical stuff where your audience doesn't have to buy a course or buy a book. They don't even have the time to do either, because your audience trusts you to deliver value. And you don't take that trust lightly. I think you're also listening for so-called experts who are really stiffs. I mean, they are dyed-in-the-wool boring, because you have to protect your audience from them. And then you have to go back and tell that expert that you can't post the interview. So can you relate to any of what I just said?
Oh yeah, for sure. For sure. That's pretty spot on.
And so when I was spot on to what you were listening for, could you feel yourself calming down a little bit and shifting in your mind to, my audience matters to me. I'm not here to just sell them stuff. I want to make their lives better. Could you feel your mind shift a little bit?
Mm-hmm. So how can, almost playing right into what you said, how can somebody more deliberately on a day-to-day basis try to make sure when they're having conversations with somebody that they're speaking to them that they're talking to them so that they're focusing on what the other person's listening for, and they're not just speaking at them, they're actually speaking to them, to something that will hit a nerve with them? How can people actually apply that on a day-to-day basis, in a conversation by conversation basis?
Well, this is a little side note. I had breakfast with Larry King every morning for 2 years before COVID. And I watched the man, I watched his interviews. People loved being interviewed by Larry King because he was probably the most curious interviewer. He didn't give advice, which I'm giving. He didn't give opinions, which I'm not giving. Maybe I am a little bit. But what happened is he was intensely curious, and people loved being interviewed by Larry King because he was intensely curious, and he was never judgmental, and he never hit his guests with a gotcha. And so what you want to do is realize that whoever you're with has something that matters to them that they're probably not bringing out, because often we keep it to ourselves and we don't even know what it is. So when you're in a conversation, you can even pause and say, maybe I'm misreading this, but I just picked up that you're listening for something that we're not talking about. And they're going to go, huh? Could say, I know we're talking about this, but I picked up that, you're listening for something else. And it could be that you need to tell me that, you had to leave 5 minutes ago because your Uber's outside. So I'm not sure what it is, but can you fill me in what you might be listening for? Now you got to get comfortable with this. And then what Larry King would do, so he's focused on what they're listening for. What his guests were listening for was to be able to speak their mind without the worry that someone's going to corner them and hit them with a gotcha. So here's an exercise, because I like to give tactics. And if you follow this exercise and you do it at least once a day with one intentional conversation, because you'd like to be more present. And what present means is the other person feels that you're really giving them your undivided attention. Present doesn't mean that you're selling.
Right.
That might be present for you, but it's really intense. And that's not presence, that's kind of overkill. So the exercise is called the HUVA exercise, HUVA. And what HUVA stands for, you might want to write this down. H is heard out. U is understood. V is valued. A is added value. So pick one conversation a day. Could be in your professional life, could be in your personal life. And this is how you build the muscle. After the conversation, put yourself in the other person's shoes and rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10 on all of those. So you have this conversation. Afterwards, you think of them, and on a scale of 1 to 10, how much did they feel heard out by you? Or did you interrupt it? Did you change the subject? Did you not let them finish talking? On a scale of 1 to 10, how much they feel understood by you? And you show that by asking them to say something more about something. So if they use an emotional word like a great opportunity or terrific or awful, when they say that, say a little bit more about the great opportunity. Say a little bit more about the awful. And then that helps them feel understood. On a scale of 1 to 10, did they feel valued? So if they offer or they share something that shows particular smartness or insight, you pause and you show appreciation for that. Could you say that again? Why? You don't know how valuable what you just said is.
Yeah.
And then the final A is you added value on a scale of 1 to 10. Beyond the valuing, you might even say, have you ever thought of applying that in other situations? Well, what do you mean? What you said, you could use everywhere. So this is just an example.
Yeah.
And don't beat up on yourself if you begin to discover that you're awful at this.
Most people are going to be.
Yeah, but can you see how that would build a muscle?
Yeah, well, I think that, to me, when you were going through it, I feel like that's subconsciously my goal, to try to hit a 10 on every single one of those. Maybe despite that last one during every single podcast interview, maybe I don't add, maybe I'll throw in a little bit of things here and there, adding a little bit of value, but it's making them feel heard, understood by following up, tell me a little bit more about that, making them feel valued, being like, oh, that was freaking awesome point. I know everybody's going to want to write that down. I know everybody's going to want to go apply that. I know everyone's going to go buy your book. Like, I feel like those are kind of checkpoints that I can use kind of in my interviews, and people can use in their everyday conversations too.
Yeah, and I feel, and I think you're terrific, Nick, because I feel your sincere enthusiasm. I can feel how much you want to give value to your listeners. And again, whoever's listening, watching this, take this with a grain of salt from a baby boomer who you're probably thinking, aren't you guys dead yet? Now again, I'm not in your generation, but I think if there can be, when you're asking them to go further, if the energy really feels more like you're inviting than the energy of, oh, that's really good. And it's a different energy. So the more that you can have an inviting energy that shows you're curious, the better. I remember years ago, I had lunch with I was a baby boomer, but I had lunch with some 230-somethings. And what happened is the 30-something man asked the 30-something woman, where'd you go to school? What'd you study? And they were good questions, icebreakers. And I took the 30-something male aside afterwards. I said, those were great questions. But I want to tell you, if I was a billionaire, and I know billionaires, because I've interacted with him. I've had conversations with him. I knew this fellow, Eli Broad, in Los Angeles, who died not too long ago. And I said, if you're going to ask questions, I said, you took a training course. And if you ask questions, you got to care about the answer. Because if you're just asking questions because you were told that was the right thing to do and you move the conversation along, then what's going to happen is it's not going to feel sincere. It's going to feel like this is something you were trained to do. And now let's quickly segue to the business at hand. Now, I understand you have to get to the business at hand. I'm just saying, I said, look, you don't talk to billionaires. And if you talk like that to a billionaire, you're never going to talk to them again.
Yeah. I think that's really key to, it sounds so obvious that you have to, when you ask a question, you have to care about the answer. But I think it's something that so many people, especially if you are a driven person, somebody who's just always on the go, you're trying to meet, one of the things that Stephen Covey talks about in 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, you want to be kind of efficient with things, but effective with people. And a lot of times when we ask questions, we try to breeze by their answer because we want to go get to the next question or we want to get to the next thing. And that is a easy, surefire way to lose trust or lose a good reputation or a good relationship with that other individual.
Yeah, absolutely. Along these lines, what you're talking about in terms of rushing to the next thing, one of the best pieces of advice that I heard was, unfortunately, with someone who did a lousy job. It was Jeff Immelt at GE. So, GE hasn't done that well. But a top executive coach named Mark Thompson was interviewing him. And I think you can find Mark Thompson, Jeff Immelt promotion. And Mark Thompson said, what's your best advice to someone if they want to get a promotion? And what Jeff Immelt said is, whatever you're doing, do it like you're going to be doing it all your life. And what he meant by that is, whatever you're doing, if you're a parking valet, if you're a dishwasher, do it with passion and getting to the point where you're excellent at it, because people are impressed with excellence more than what you're excellent at. You don't have to like basketball to be impressed by LeBron James or Steph Curry. You don't have to like golf to be impressed with Tiger Woods. And I think what Jeff Immelt was saying is, if you can be truly excellent at what you're doing, people will notice that. And they're going to ask you, what else do you do? But the point is, if you're always racing to the next thing, people are going to pick up that you're not excellent at anything.
I think that's super profound, that people are more impressed with excellence than what you're excellent at. And I think that is so true because, I am personally riveted by so many people, regardless of what industry they're in, regardless of what their talents are, just by excellence and when people are the best at what they do. So I think that is super profound. One of the things that keeps coming back is this curiosity thing and the importance of curiosity and the importance of curiosity in regards to making the other person feel understood and following up and that sort of thing. How can somebody who maybe is listening to this right now, who's thinking, I'm really just not that curious of a person, I don't really ask that many questions, how can that person start to build curiosity, or is curiosity something that you either have or you don't have?
So I'm one of the founding members of the Newsweek Expert Forum. And, people contribute to Forbes, and now Newsweek is starting up. And my most recent article is teaching transactional people the power of empathy. Because transactional people are generally seen as non-empathic. And I'll just summarize it, but if you look up teaching transactional people the power of empathy, what I basically cover is imagine that you're a highly transactional person and your boss is on your case or your investors are on your case. And their attitude towards you is don't bring me explanations and excuses, bring me results. And you don't know what to do, and you're stuck. It's a place where entrepreneurs often feel. But you can't yell at them. You can't get angry at them. You sort of hunker down. You're scared and you're nervous. When you go home, you don't want to yell at your spouse or your kids because, then you're a crappy mom or a crappy dad or crappy husband or wife, a boyfriend, a girlfriend. And so you're all pent up. And so imagine that frame of mind. You're ready to explode, but there's no place to explode. I suppose you can go out and get smashed and drunk, but then you feel embarrassed the next day. And so here's the power of empathy. Imagine that you do go back to your apartment and your partner and you snap at them. They say something and you snap at them, and then they snap back at you and say, who the F do you think you are? Don't blah, 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 blah. And then what happens is it escalates. And then inside you feel like, oh, I did that again. But imagine if when you vented at them, they said, wow, this is not who you are. What happened to you? And you go, what? And they basically see goodness in you and something must have, and they say, what happened to you that this is what you just said and how you said it? And then imagine that you're able to start venting safely and they don't judge you. They invite it instead of escalating. What's going to happen is you're going to get stuff off your chest. And when you get stuff off your chest, you're going to calm down. And when you get stuff off your chest and you calm down, guess what? You can start to think more clearly and you're going to discover the answers. Mm-hmm. Okay, so can you track with that, Nick?
Yeah. I think that's definitely, I think that's very revealing in that scenario. I'm more pointing towards if somebody is looking to gain value from a conversation, like a coffee or a lunch, or they're having a conversation with their boss, with their mentor, or they're trying to figure out what it is that they can do to get a promotion or better their health and fitness. But they're not looking for the right solutions, or they're not looking for the right questions to ask. They're not looking for the right problems to solve. Like, how can that person become more curious to improve maybe their own lives, rather than necessarily curious when like a situation like that comes up?
Okay, so here's an example. Here's a couple ways to win friends and influence bosses.
Okay.
What is on most bosses' minds?
Make more money.
In most managers' minds, yeah, they want to make more money. But if you try this conversation, you're going to get a smile out of them. And what you say to them is, I want to run something by you. So you're the subordinate. Because I put myself in your shoes, and I think I figured out what you want from our conversations when we get together. So again, you're trying to take it out of the transactional and trigger curiosity. And you say, can I share with you what I think's on your mind when we have conversations? I can't imagine a boss not being curious. And you say, I think there's 4 things you want. You want me to be relevant, meaning that whatever I bring up is tied to what we're trying to accomplish, or whatever I bring up is actually something you can do something about. So you want me to be relevant. You want me to be clear so you don't have to dig through what I'm saying. You want me to be concise so that I don't go on. And then you want me to be gone so you can get on to your busy day. Might that win you? Would you like that if I was more relevant, clear, concise, and gone? And you said they're going to smile because unconsciously that's absolutely what they want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's good. But we're getting down here in time, so I want to transition to the topic that we talked a little bit about prior to recording, because I do think it is going to be very relevant and super intriguing to those listening. So we were talking about how millennials in general are probably a more impatient generation, because we grew up with the internet, getting instant feedback, getting instant answers, instant solutions. We get instant gratification all the time, every single day. And you talked about how that is going to maybe come to our demise or come to be a negative thing with having kids.
Yeah, here's my worry. And again, there's a good chance that I'm just out of the loop, because I'm a different generation. But I'm noticing this. I'm noticing this at parks because I'm a grandparent and I see other grandparents, I see children, I see the grandchildren. And what I'm noticing is I believe millennials are more impatient because they grew up on the internet, and their heroes are not really relationship people. Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos. They're not known, Bill Gates, they're not known to be the greatest relationship people, but they're really great with technology and Moore's law and just speeding up. And so my concern is when you become a parent as a millennial, infants don't understand algorithms. Infants need patience. They're not able to clearly communicate, when they're hungry, when they need you to hold them, when they need to be fed, and you have trouble figuring it out. So my concern, and I have seen this, is that millennials who are have learned to be impatient out in the world, when that infant tries their patience, that one of the parents, more often the mom, because she gave birth to that infant, starts to become impatient. But she doesn't want to get impatient at her child because she doesn't want to be an angry parent. So what she does is she deflects it towards her spouse. And I'm seeing more and more of that because, as I said, infants do not run on algorithms. And you think you're checking the boxes, they'll just calm down. Well, I checked everything, I changed them, I fed them. And I'm worried about that because I see this, and I hope I'm wrong. But I worry that especially millennial moms who get frustrated, they're sleep deprived, they're also working, and they don't want to take out their frustration on their infant. They deflect it and snap at their spouse. And the spouse is like, what do you want from me? So I hope I'm wrong. If I am right, and your listeners made it all the way through our episode, I hope they will, comment or write you and say, let's spend a whole other podcast on that topic because it's happening to our family.
So for then a brief couple minutes, but instead of being able to deliver a full podcast on the topic right now, for a couple minutes, if somebody is like, holy crap, yeah, I'm impatient towards maybe my child, or maybe it's not even I'm impatient towards my child, I'm just impatient towards somebody, and I might be deflecting it to somebody else. What can I start to do to begin to work on myself and begin to work on becoming more patient?
Well, impatience begets impatience. True vulnerability begets patience. So if you're that impatient, parent. Rather than deflecting your frustration and turning into anger that you direct at your partner, if you take them aside, and there's something that I call assertive vulnerability. And what you say to your spouse is, I need your help. Mm. And it's not like I need your help, it's I need your help with something. So they check that you're going to be honest, and you look at them and you say, I'm scared. What are you scared about? I love our child, but I'm so tired, and inside I just sometimes feel so angry, and I feel I'm turning into a bad parent, and I'm scared. And it doesn't seem to be getting better because my boss is on me. I'm scared. And you don't. And if you're that spouse, don't give them solutions. You might say, well, what would you like me to do? If you try this out and you look at your spouse and you say, you're doing it right now. You're just letting me tell you.
Yeah.
Because what I usually do is, instead of being scared, I get snippy, I get angry, I bark at you. And then I'm not only frustrated and angry at our child, I'm angry at you, and it's a real mess.
So am I hearing it right that one of the ways that you can work on your impatience is to simply take on that tactic of assertive vulnerability and say that, and just kind of communicate that I am being impatient to somebody who's willing to listen?
I think the best thing is, and again, this is something that millennials don't talk that openly about. Millennials don't talk openly to another person about feeling hurt or scared.
Right.
What they do is they race into activity to distract from it. But if you can share that you're hurt or scared without dumping it on the other person, it's their fault, do something about it. And what I'm trying to do right here in this podcast is introduce you to there's a way of just expressing that without making the other person feel like it's their fault or their responsibility. But you're going to have to try it a few times to see if what I'm telling you is true for you.
Yeah. Something I think what you said is really key and super true, that millennials aren't very good at communicating when they're scared or when they're hurt and things like that. And they use other modes of releasing that hurt, stress, whatever it is, to kind of get it out of them. Like, so many people, like I'm a fitness trainer, so I hear it all the time. People will be like, fitness is my stress reliever, doing boxing is my stress reliever, running is my stress reliever. And while I think that's, obviously useful to have that output to be able to release your stress, is that really solving the problem, or is it just putting a Band-Aid on it? Like, do they need to find a way to communicate the problem to somebody else?
Well, I think the exercise can help you calm down enough so that you're not running on your amygdala hijack.
Right.
But here's a tip that I'd like you to try with some of your clients, because you're a fitness instructor. And work it in, and then you'll get back to me that it either backfired or opened up. Somewhere in your training, you say, can I ask you a question? And they'll say, of course. And you say, can you tell me about something that's going on that exercise doesn't relieve? You're going to say, what? Yeah, can you just tell me about something that's going on that exercise, calms you a little bit, but it doesn't relieve? They're going to pause because you've just pivoted, and they're going to look at you like, are you really asking this question? And they might say, why are you asking this? Because I care about, you may not understand this, but I care about your well-being more than I care about your fitness. And then they're going to open up, and you're going to text me, Mark, they opened up. What do I do now?
Yeah.
You just keep them talking.
I need a psychologist.
You just keep them talking, and what's going to happen, and I don't want you to get freaked out, Nick, is you didn't make them cry, you're going to let them cry, and they're going to cry. And so that crying is relief, and you need to see it as relief as opposed to, oh, I just opened a can of worms.
Yeah.
And you just allow it to come, and they'll get through it. And you're not a psychologist, but some things you can say, because this is like striking gold. And other questions you can say is, how often do you feel this way? Yeah. At its worst, how bad can that get for you? Wow. What have you discovered that helps you get through it or get past it? Wow. The Hoover, boy, that's really valuable. I'm going to try that. But you follow what I'm saying? These are ways to open it up.
For sure. And those are good questions, whether you're a fitness trainer or you're in a relationship with somebody who you feel is not getting out everything they need to get out.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Well, this has been awesome. I want to make sure I get you out on time. But before I ask the last question here, Mark, I just want to acknowledge you, because you do such an amazing job of pinpointing a lot of issues that people have that are pretty abstract issues, that aren't super tactile issues, but you do a great job of giving tactile practices and strategies that people can start to apply to start to fix those things. Like, we didn't even really get to talking about your new audio course called Defeating Self-Defeat, but a couple of the things are talking about why people procrastinate and how we can make sure we don't procrastinate, how we can make sure we don't take things too personally, how to not let fear ruin and run your lives. And those are super abstract things that you give tactile things that people can do.
So can I give a quick tip? Because the course is at Himalaya.com/defeat. And if you put defeat in the promo code, you can hear it. It's an audio course. But it looks at things from a different point of view. So I'll give you a little taste of it. So one of the early episodes is procrastination. And what I talk about is that we procrastinate not because we're disorganized or we're lazy. We procrastinate because we're lonely. Because when we were kids and we had to do things and it was painful, but we didn't have a choice, we said inside, when I grow up, I'm not going to do this. So we procrastinate on anything that we anticipate is going to be painful. But my evidence that we do it because we're lonely is a little organization called AA. The reason people stop drinking is you get to talk it out with other people. People don't give you advice. They hear you out. And so because you all feel connected, all that oxytocin lets down the stress. I also talk about, and I'll just share this anecdote, which you might find interesting because you're a podcast host. I remember I was on a radio show with this wonderful host, and I said, anything you're procrastinating on? She said, yeah, I should write a book. Everybody says I should write a book. I said, how long have you been putting it off? She said, a couple of years. I said, well, I'm going to prove what I'm saying is true. If you were to write the book, when would be the best time to write it? I think she said 6:30 in the morning. I said, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to call you every day for a month at 6:30 your time, 3:30 in the morning my time. And I'm going to say, get to your computer. I'm waking up at 3:30. I may not get back to sleep. Get to your computer. And then when you're in front of your computer, I'm going to say, what's the question I should ask you so you can start writing? So we did that. And she told her audience, that crazy psychiatrist, he's waking up and doing this. 6 months later, she calls me and she says, what's your address so I can send you my book?
Yeah, no doubt. I think that I've listened to that story on your audio course, and I think that is, definitely super revealing. And I know that through my experience with fitness coaching and fitness goals, a lot of people procrastinate on achieving their fitness goals or on losing weight or on doing this, on doing that. And me stepping in as their coach and me stepping in as their, accountability partner gets them going and makes them feel not lonely, so they don't procrastinate on it any longer. So I think that's awesome stuff. And people, you guys need to go get that or check out the audio course. Again, Defeating Self-Defeat. You can go to Himalaya.com/defeat. Use the promo code defeat and you can get it for free. And I'll make sure that's linked up in the show notes as well. You can get his awesome book, Just Listen. That is one of the top listening books in the entire world. And and you can follow Mark on Instagram and social media at Mark Goulston. And you can follow his and listen to his podcast, My Wakeup Call podcast as well. But Mark, last question here. And I asked it to you last time, and so I'm interested to see what maybe has changed or tweaked. But I think that getting closer to the best version of yourself is both a constant journey and a unique journey. I don't think we're ever at that best version. And I also think that the way that I'm going to get closer to the best version of myself is going to be a little bit different than the way that you get closer to the best version of yourself. So for you personally, if there are 3 things that you could currently do or currently work on to get to that best version of yourself that you could possibly be, then what are those 3 things that you could currently do or work on?
Well, I might need to hire you because I probably need to take better care of myself, exercise-wise, dieting. Those are still stress relievers for me. Mm-hmm. And my wife and my kids want me to be around for a long time. The second thing is I need to be more present in conversations because I pick up speed, and my friend Marty Nemko was right that I need to listen more as opposed to giving all this expert advice. Now people say, but Mark, it's pretty good advice. Yeah, but I could do a better job because my ego gets in the way. And then I think the other thing is I have trouble forgiving myself. But, when you're somewhat entrepreneurial, and I got this advice from Jack Cochran. He was the CEO of the Kaiser Permanente Foundation. He said, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you have to always forgive your mistakes, because if you can't forgive your mistakes, you're going to be making tons of mistakes as an entrepreneur. And if you know you're going to beat up on yourself, you're not going to take risks. So I think those things would help me.
That's awesome. Well, those were 3 great things. Super valuable information today, Dr. Goulston. I really appreciate your time, and thanks for coming back on.
Well, thank you for having me, Nick. It's always a pleasure.